Imagine leaving everything behind, family, friends, the comfort of home, to fight in a brutal conflict, knowing you might never return. This isn't just a sacrifice, it's a commitment to something greater, a fight for the freedom and survival of a people. In this video, we're going to dive into the real stories of Ukrainian and foreign fighters who did just that. They faced the unimaginable, fought with courage, and many of them paid the ultimate price. Stay with me until the end as we uncover the untold stories of these heroes who, though fallen, remain alive in the memory of everyone who believes in the fight for a better world. James Vasquez from Norwalk, Connecticut, gained notoriety by volunteering to fight in Ukraine against Russian forces. He began sharing videos and updates about his experience on social media, where he quickly amassed a large following. James Vasquez, 48, became one of the most famous Americans aiding Ukraine, sharing dramatic footage from the front lines alongside Da Vinci's Wolves Battalion. Vasquez claimed to be a decorated sergeant in the U.S. Army, heroically showcasing his skills on missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the truth is that James Vasquez had been discharged from the Army Reserve before he ever went to war. The Pentagon confirmed that he had never been deployed and was only a private first class, one of the lowest ranks in the Army, not a seasoned combat sergeant. His wife, Tina Vasquez, filed for divorce upon discovering all his lies. Tina said that James would cry when recounting his heroic deeds. Sarah Ashton Cirillo, an American journalist who also enlisted to fight in Ukraine, stated that Vasquez was never formally associated with the Ukrainian armed forces and that he acted as a civilian during his visits to the country. Vasquez allegedly raised thousands of dollars in donations for Ukraine's war effort. Currently, James Vasquez's whereabouts are unknown. Brock Greenwood, a resident of Queensland, Australia, had never held a gun in his life. Although he had no connection to Ukraine, Brock Greenwood wanted to risk his life to help people. He was reprimanded by his family, who forbade him from such an idea. Several times, Brock's family sabotaged him, causing him to miss the flights he had booked to leave the country. It was then that Brock came up with the idea of deceiving his mother, saying he was going to live with his father in Hervey Bay. Brock took advantage of this and caught a flight to Melbourne and then to Poland. His mother found out too late that he was in Poland on April 20th, 2023, because someone else sent her a photo of him. The next day, Brock took a train to Kyiv. In Ukraine, Brock Greenwood joined the International Legion as a volunteer, and despite having no military experience, he stood out during his training and was appointed leader of a team of foreign fighters. On July 6, 2024, Brock Greenwood was killed in combat after being hit by Russian artillery. He was 24 years old. Eduard Lobau was born in Vilnius, Lithuania, which was then part of the Soviet Union, but he was of Belarusian nationality. Eduard Lobau became deeply involved in politics and the pro-democracy movement, Young Front, in Belarus. In December 2010, Eduard Lobau actively participated in protests against the regime of Alexander Lukashenko and was arrested, being sentenced to 4 years in a penal colony. Human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International, considered him a prisoner of conscience. After his release in 2014, Eduard Lobau moved to Ukraine, where he joined the Ukrainian forces as a volunteer in the Donbass War in 2015. First, he served in the Right Sector Battalion, then in the 8th Separate Special Forces Regiment in Khmelnytsky. Later, he served with the Black Cossacks Brigade. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Eduard Lobau joined the Kastus Kalinowski Regiment, which was formed by Belarusian volunteers. Eduard Lobau was an expert grenadier and proficient with the American Javelin portable anti-tank missile system. Eduard was so masterful with these weapons that it seemed like he was playing a video game. One day, Eduard Lobau left the trench alone and fired a machine gun at a landing force of Russian troops. In the end, 15 bodies of Russian soldiers were found lying on the ground. On January 26, 2023, Eduard Lobau was killed after being hit by a fragment of a tank shell near Vuhledar. He was 34 years old. Murilo Lopez Santos was born in the city of Castro, in the state of Paraná, Brazil, a region that received a large number of European immigrants between the 19th and 20th centuries. Murilo was a descendant of Ukrainian Jews and served in the Brazilian army for 1.5 years. He was self-taught, took online courses, and learned several languages. Murilo used to say that it was cowardly for Russia to invade Ukraine, and he wanted to help. Despite his mother's objections, Murilo Lopez Santos planned his entire trip, made the itinerary, bought the tickets, organized everything, and went alone. Murilo landed in Krakow, Poland, and took a bus to the Ukrainian border. Afterward, he spent about a month in the Ukrainian city of Ternopil. He arrived in Ukraine on November 3, 2022, voluntarily enlisted in the International Legion, and was sent to the front lines. During his time in Ukraine, Murilo reported to his family that he had no plans to return to Brazil, wishing to settle permanently in the European country. Communication with his family became increasingly scarce, especially in recent months. Between July 5 and 6, 2024, Murilo Lopez Santos was killed in action along with Australian Brock Greenwood, callsign Chippy, after being hit by Russian artillery in the city of Zaporizhia. He was 26 years old. Olena Sanuk was born in the village of Obaniji in the Volyn region and graduated from Lviv State University of Life Safety and Ecology and Environmental Protection. But Olena had a passion for cooking and worked as a chef in Lviv, spending most of her time as a sushi chef. In 2015, Olena Sanuk joined the ranks of the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade and initially served as a cook. Olena enjoyed preparing tasty dishes in the military kitchen, which made her comrades happy. Later, she completed tactical medicine courses and became a combat medic. Olena was a brave patriot who was always present in the most intense combat areas. On September 3, 2022, while in combat in the Kharkiv region, Olena Sanuk was killed during a Russian tank attack when a shell exploded a few yards from her, causing fatal injuries. Olena Sanuk was 28 years old and left behind a 3-year-old daughter. Alejandro Herrera was born in the municipality of Garzón, Huila, Colombia. Alejandro had a significant military career in his home country, serving as a professional soldier and working for the Attorney General's Office and the Technical Investigation Corps of Colombia. In December 2022, Alejandro Herrera traveled to Ukraine and joined the International Legion. He went to Ukraine motivated by the promise of better economic conditions for his family, as he was facing financial difficulties in Colombia. Herrera was involved in intense combat in various regions under constant attack from Russian bombardments and artillery. Alejandro Herrera warned other Colombians on his Facebook page about the dangers and harsh living conditions faced in the war, emphasizing the need for psychological preparation for those considering joining the conflict. On August 29, 2023, Alejandro Herrera was killed by a Russian missile. He was 39 years old and left behind a wife and one child. Andro Fabijanic, originally from Zagreb, left the tranquility of his country to directly help those in need in the war zone. Andro Fabijanic worked as a personal fitness trainer, but seeing the Ukrainian suffering caused by the Russian invasion was unbearable for him. He left his job and went to the war. In Ukraine, he worked for the Four Heroes from Dnipropetrovsk Association, delivering bandages and medical aid to Ukrainian veterans fighting against Russian aggression in their war-torn land. Fabijanic also helped evacuate families from Ukraine to Europe, with many of them going to his home country. On September 13, 2022, Andro Fabijanic was transporting medical supplies for Ukrainian fighters when the vehicle he was traveling in struck a landmine. The explosion killed Andro Fabijanic instantly, and several of his Ukrainian colleagues were injured. Andro Fabijanic had a ticket purchased and was set to return to Croatia in 2 days, but tragically, his return home was not possible. He was 29 years old. Hamil Mukia, from Gujarat, India, was a young Indian like many others, seeking better job opportunities abroad. The decision to look for work in Russia was driven by the promise of better financial and living prospects. He used an online platform to find job opportunities abroad. Hamil was attracted by a recruitment video he saw on YouTube and thought he was going for a safe security job, far from the war in Ukraine, with the promise of a monthly salary of $1,800. Upon arriving in Russia in December 2023, Hamil was forced to undergo a month-long military training. After the training, he was sent to the front lines and was tasked with digging bunkers and trenches, as well as transporting heavy weapons for Russian soldiers. In phone calls, he told his father that he also had to operate rifles and machine guns. On February 21st, 2024, Hamil Mukia was killed during an airstrike in the Donetsk region. He was 23 years old. Sergeant Valeri Marcus of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces has made several allegations about incompetence and low morale within his unit. Valeri Marcus voluntarily requested to be demoted, stating that the commander's decisions were not aligned with the brigade's values and that he could no longer influence or correct the situation. He criticized the deputy commander of the brigade, calling him an amoral degenerate, and claimed that working alongside him was degrading his honor and dignity. On the other hand, Rustam Mustafayev, a sergeant from the same brigade's UAV strike company, refuted Marcus's criticisms, accusing him of self-promotion at the expense of his colleagues' work and blood. Mustafayev stated that there was no systematic humiliation within the sergeant corps, and that the soldiers' morale was actually well managed by the higher command, which was in direct contact to ensure the best working conditions for the unit. Valeri Marcus expressed his desire to be demoted on his Facebook page, mentioning that he was completely against the decisions made about the deployment and development of the 47th Brigade and, as a result, requested to be demoted to be closer to his soldiers on the battlefield. In the post, he was reprimanded by Valeri Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, for sitting in the trench without any body armor. "Valeri, put on your gear right now, or I will teach you a lesson," Zaluzhny wrote. Valeri Marcus and his soldiers had to sleep on top of the bodies of Russian soldiers after assaulting enemy positions to maintain their position and advance further. The impact was so significant that Valeri Marcus was invited to a meeting with the Ukrainian president, where the reform of the Sergeant Corps was discussed. Olena Bosera began her military journey in 2014 by joining the Ukrainian Volunteer Corps Right Sector, which was previously known as the Wolf Group. She served as a sniper alongside her husband, who was one of the commanders of the volunteer battalion. Olena Bosera is a professional journalist and worked as an editor for over 10 years before the war. Olena also participated in protests against the arbitrariness of the authorities during the Yanukovych era and was an active participant in the Revolution of Dignity. In 2018, Olena Bosera signed a contract with the Armed Forces of Ukraine and became a Marine in the 503rd Separate Marine Brigade. Shortly before the Russian invasion, Olena Bosera resigned from the armed forces due to health reasons and underwent surgery. However, on February 24, 2022, she took up arms again without hesitation. Russians and separatists have created the image of a classic enemy for Olena. Russian propaganda has repeatedly spread false news of her death. Today, she is an officer in the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a fighter in the Active Operations Unit of the Main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. When asked about the main reason for joining the army, Olena Bosera responded, "To put an end to all those who invade my country." If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive more videos like this. Write your opinion in the video comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video on Military Schedule.